Hi guys, how are you all today morning? Good morning. Today is 21st December 2023. My name is TSV Raghavan and I live in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India. This is my spiritual vlog on YouTube. HARDAN, 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 Haribol, TSV Nectar, NECTAR, nectar. In this particular vlog, in all my previous videos, we have been trying to discuss about the knowledge and information that we have gleaned through the study of spiritual books, scriptures, contemplation on the material universe, and meditation on the spiritual universe. This particular video in this vlog is no exception to that rule. In fact, it is a mere continuation of all that we have been trying to do in all my previous videos. Kindly subscribe to this vlog and press the bell icon so that I may keep reminding you of all my previous, present, and future videos. So let us continue with the topic of discussion for today's video. In the past few videos, we have been trying to discuss and analyze at length a particular term which is very perennial in the psyche and the life of every human living entity, whether male or female, in a lifetime in this material world. This term is known as mind. Mind is a subtle form of instrument that is perennial for the existence and functioning of every human living entity, whether male or female, in a particular lifetime. Every individual living entity, whether male or female, has an individual mind. Just like every vehicle, whether a bike or a four-wheeler, a train or an aeroplane, a ship or a boat, has an individual engine to work as an instrument to drive that particular machinery. Similarly, every human living entity, whether male or female, needs this subtle instrument called a mind to make that particular living entity live in a lifetime and act accordingly. In Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which is a major segment of the great Hindu epic Mahabharata, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, explains this life of a living entity perfectly to his best friend and Pandava prince Arjuna. Arjuna once complains to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, that though he wants to focus on his purpose through meditation and contemplation, this mind is so powerful and distracted that it tries to prevent Arjuna from focusing on his purpose. At that time, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, condescends to explain the nature of this mind to Arjuna smilingly. Lord Krishna says, this human living entity, individually, whether male or a female, is just like an ordinary chariot. This chariot is being driven by 5 white horses. These 5 white horses represent the 5 senses of every human living entity, namely sight, hearing, breath, taste, and touch. These 5 horses are influenced indirectly or directly in different ways by these 5 senses. Every horse has one particular sense to influence it. This is precisely the reason why these 5 horses run in different directions while trying to drive this chariot, and they try to pull this chariot to some direction according to the whims and fantasies of that particular sense, and so that particular horse. To rein all these senses or horses, we need a pilot of that chariot. The name of this pilot is intelligence. It is intelligence that holds the reins of all these 5 horses running in different directions, and it tries to control them and to make them follow one particular path towards the final goal of that particular living entity. There is only one passenger in that chariot. This passenger is sitting on the passenger seat of that particular chariot. The name of this passenger is the individual, raw, unevolved spirit soul. We all know by now that when an individual, raw, unevolved spirit soul, in its complacence and overconfidence to rule over this material nature, tries to get in touch with this material world. This visibly irritated material world. To avoid that irritation, envelops this spirit soul with four layers of its own material element based body. These four bodies are made up of five material elements. The first element is known as ether, the second is known as air, the third fire, the fourth water, and the fifth earth. Ether is the original element from which air, from which fire, from which water, and from which earth emanate. This ether is used to make the first three subtle layers of body, namely the causal body of intelligence and logic, the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions, and the etheric body of five senses, namely sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. On the other hand, the other four elements, which emanate directly or indirectly from the ether, are used to create the gross body or the fourth layer of material body for that particular spirit soul. When that spirit soul is thus enveloped by these four layers of material body, a catalyst or glue called ego is used to cement the spirit soul with the four layers of the material body and the four layers with the same glue to cement each other. Thus, ego, whether false, actual, or superego, is used to cement this particular soul to the material world. As soon as this happens, this particular soul loses its original identity as an individual spirit soul, and it turns into what is known as a living entity. This living entity takes its own time to get acclimatized to this material world. When it gets acclimatized to this material world, then a endless chain of birth and death begins for that particular living entity. We have been discussing about this matter in my previous videos. It would suffice to know that the gross body of every individual living entity is used to identify each living entity in this material world of the God's inferior energy. In other words, a cell, an algae, amoeba, weeds, shrubs, creeps, creepers, grass, plants, trees, worms, insects, reptiles, lizards, amphibians, birds, beasts, and humans are individually identified according to their respective gross body. If this gross body of each individual living entity drops to the terra firma, the subtle bodies of the same living entity cannot be identified with the naked eye of this gross body. This we must remember and understand before proceeding further. As I mentioned before, this living entity is a chariot driven by five horses, which symbolize the senses, and intelligence tries to reign and control them. The passenger is this spirit soul. However, there is another instrument which is perennial in making this chariot run and work. This particular instrument is known as mind. We are analyzing this particular very powerful and very important instrument called mind in the psyche and life of every human living entity, whether male or female, in this material world. As every individual living entity has an individual mind, hence we cannot ignore any living entity. In the society at a given lifetime, there are three categories of living entities. The first is called masses, which comprises 75% of the living entities in the society in the material world at any given lifetime. This 75% consists of individual living entities, whether male or female, who vegetate like zombies in this society under the very wrong impression that they have come here only to vegetate and to live with what this society or this material world provides to them according to their own prarabdha karma, destiny, and luck. This 75% is not yet evolved to think that it has come here with a purpose in the life. As long as any living entity does not realize the existence of his or her purpose in life, he or she cannot focus on that purpose and contribute something to this society. Here I would hasten to add that this society as such is full in itself. Any contribution done by any human living entity to this society is something which he or she has only changed the shape of in the already existing society. However, this is very important not for the society or the material world, but for that particular living entity alone. It helps this person progress further towards his or her evolvement, self realization, liberation from repeated births and deaths, and final deliverance to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anyway, as I mentioned before, every individual living entity has an individual mind. 75% of humanity at any given time does not bother to use this mind to understand and follow his or her purpose in life. Now remain the rest 25%. Destiny has been very kind to give ordinary life to 75% and the negative dark forces to the other 20%. 20% of this society at any time is that which worships and lives for the dark negative forces of this material world. There is an English proverb: good or big surprises come in small packages, and bullshit comes in bulk. The rest 5% are the small good surprises which may be called the cream de la cream of the society at any given lifetime. This 5% consists of those exalted living entities who have at last not only understood their positive purpose in life, but who are busy following their own bull's eye with a focused attention, dedication, and sincerity. This 5% of positive living entities includes those who have a material purpose in life and those who have a spiritual purpose in life, but both are equally positive. On the material side, there are intellectuals, philosophers, professors, teachers, writers, positive creators, and scientists, inventors, discoverers, etc. In the spiritual side, there are sages, saints, rishis, maharishis, and exalted souls who want to lead a spiritual life. We all must try to reach this bracket of 5% one day or the other so that we may steadily and slowly progress towards individual self realization, liberation from this repeated cycle of birth and death, and final deliverance to the Supreme Personality of Godhead as exalted and evolved individual spirit souls. We have been trying to discuss several case histories to authenticate this argument. In that process, we realized that the 75% mass of this society, which leads a mundane existence, does not have any individual living entity to be used as a case study. Of the rest, we have discussed the case histories of many material and spiritual living entities belonging to the 5% category. It was only the 20% worshippers of dark, negative forces of this material world that we did not consider in our discourse about this particular subject. However, after some contemplation, I understood, grudgingly albeit, that we must not ignore this 20% also to understand the material life and world in our study of human psyche and mind. Every living entity, whether he or she belongs to the 75, the 20, or the 5%, has an individual mind. Hence, we must consider how the mind of those who worship the negative forces also works. In that process, we discussed about some case histories. Now, in my past few videos, we have been trying to discuss one very big event which gives us a collective idea of how collective minds of those worshipping the dark negative forces works. In that process, we were discussing the running turf war between two very important underworld gangs hailing from Sicily and Italy in the southern part of Europe, which was trying to rule the underworld in the United States of America in the early 30s of this 20th century. These two gangs or factions of criminals were headed by two notorious mobsters, namely the first one hailing from Palermo by one person called Joseph Joe the Boss Masseria, and the other hailing from Castellammare del Golfo, headed by another mobster called Salvatore Maranzano. Many things happened during this gang war and this underworld business, which gave us a fairly good idea of how the individual mind of every living entity who worships the negative forces of this material world operates. By now, we understand that there is no honor among thieves. Thieves are those who worship the dark, negative forces of this material world. I have talked about this in this video to this extent. We shall continue our discussion in my next video. Kindly let me know what you think of my talk on this particular matter. Please give me your own expert thoughts, views, opinions, and ideas so that I may blend everything together for the sake of this society. Before concluding, let me remind you that I am also a published author with Amazon Kindle and paperback. I write on spiritualism, fiction, and assorted subjects. Spiritualism happens to be my favorite subject. Till we meet in my next video, it is good morning from TSV Raghavan.